Yesterday, we had another terrible mass shooting. At least 26 people were killed at a church in Sutherland Springs, Texas, on Sunday. Law enforcement confirmed that there were also many more injuries. The shooter is also dead following a brief chase. There was a Good Samaritan who got in his car and basically chased this guy down, and there was a shootout between the two of them, and then it appears like there was a self-inflicted gunshot wound on the part of the perpetrator. The Texas Governor Greg Abbott said, quote, "As a state, we are dealing with the largest mass shooting in our state's history." So here's what we know to this point about the shooting. The shooting reportedly occurred at the First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, Texas, around 11:30 a.m. local time. This is from Vox, by the way. At least 26 people were killed, although it's not clear if that number will rise. Approximately 20 others were injured. The shooter is dead following a car pursuit by a local resident. It's unclear if he killed himself or was killed by someone else. Since then, I think they've established that he indeed killed himself. The victims' ages range from 5 years old to 72 years old. First Baptist Church Pastor Frank Pomeroy's 14-year-old daughter and all of his family's close friends were killed in the attack. This is what Pomeroy told Houston-based ABC 13. The shooter has been identified as 26-year-old Devin Patrick Kelly. Law enforcement officials told CBS and NBC Kelly was previously in the Air Force, but he was court-martialed and sentenced to a bad conduct discharge, according to the Daily Beast. Now, I'm going to come back to that in just a second here. Local, state, and federal law enforcement are on the ground. There is no other threat in the area at the time, according to law enforcement. Sutherland Springs is about 30 miles southeast of San Antonio. It's an unincorporated community with a population of about 400, according to San Antonio-based Fox 29. The church regularly posts videos of its services, and it shows, a vibrant community with parishioners singing, playing electric guitar, and talking about all types of things. So, I told you I'd come back and I'd revisit his bad conduct discharge from the Air Force. He was discharged because he assaulted his wife and his kid. He's a domestic abuser. He was still legally able to purchase guns. Donald Trump came out after the shooting and said, well, look, don't blame the gun. This is a mental health issue is what this is. And the problem is not guns. The problem is that this guy had a gun. So blame him, blame the individual. And guess what? According to his own logic, he did the wrong thing because it was the Trump administration and it was the Republicans who recently signed a piece of legislation that said, if you're not of sound enough mind to control your finances and you're on Social Security, they say you should be able to have a gun. It was under Obama that he said, okay, listen, if we already know as a matter of fact that somebody is not of sound enough mind to control their finances, they're not of sound enough mind to control a firearm. Well, Trump and the Republicans disagreed, and they got rid of that rule. So even according to his own logic of, don't blame the gun per se, you blame this particular person and the fact that this person had a gun. Okay, well, you've shown repeatedly that you're actually okay with people with severe mental issues having guns. In fact, the Republicans have been on a tear attempting to gut Medicaid. They didn't do the Medicaid expansion under Obamacare, but that's one fact. But in Trump Care, in all the different versions, they cut Medicaid further. Well, guess what? Medicaid is the number one provider of mental health care in the country. So you don't get to do the tap dance and say, oh, mental illness, mental illness, mental illness, when you are in favor of people with severe mental issues getting a gun, and you're also not in favor of treating those mental illnesses because you're gutting the program that treats them. So this is the tap dance, and we go round and round and round, and nothing gets accomplished, even though these shootings keep happening. And by the way, let me show you this chart here, because this is something else. This shows us the 5 deadliest shootings in modern U.S. history. They've all come in the last 10 years, and 2 of them in the past 6 weeks. So the number 1 worst mass shooting just happened in Las Vegas. 58 people killed. What was it? Over 300 people injured? That just happened. And now, a month later, 26 people killed in Sutherland Springs, Texas. And you go down the list there. There was the one in Orlando, Florida, the Pulse nightclub shooting. That was in 2016. Virginia Tech, 2007. Sandy Hook, 2012. You go down the list there, and if it feels like they're occurring more often, it's because they are. And we live in a country that's so corrupt, and the system is so rotten, that even when 93% of the American people say, I want a universal background check, a comprehensive universal background check for gun purchases, we don't get that passed. We don't get that into law. I mean, that's wild, man. In what's supposed to be a representative democracy, you would think that the politicians would represent you enough where when 93% of you want something, we get it. I mean, that's a pretty open and shut case, is it not? But no, we don't get it. Why? Because the NRA pays a tremendous amount of money to Republican politicians, and they block any and all reform on this issue, no matter how commonsensical it is. I mean, 93% universal background check, we can't get that. 60% want to ban on high-capacity magazines, we can't get that. And by the way, you know how sometimes it's the case where you look at a shooting and you go, I don't know what law could have prevented this. Because sometimes a law couldn't have prevented it, because the facts of the matter are just, hey, the person didn't have anything messed up in their background, or, for whatever reason, a specific law wouldn't have stopped a specific case. Well, this is one of those cases where a law would have stopped it. By the way, the Dylan Roof one, they didn't complete the background check on Dylan Roof before they sold him his weapon. If we had a longer waiting period between when he goes to purchase his gun and when he actually gets his gun, perhaps the Dylan Roof one could have been prevented, because he would have failed the background check. In this instance, if the guy is a domestic abuser, I mean, any thorough background check that has, rules linked to that would go, yeah, we're not selling to you because you're a domestic abuser. So this isn't a lot to ask for, man. This is not a lot to ask for. To say, let's have a background check, let's have rules as to who can and cannot buy it. And then people go, well, listen, but Kyle, that's not going to work, because then who's to say that these people won't go on the black market and get a gun that way and then end up doing the same thing? Yes, in some of those cases. But you will prevent many of these shootings because these laws deter some people from going that extra step. Some people might not have the connect to get a gun on the black market or something like that. So what we're talking about here is macro statistics. And we live in a country where over 10,000 people die every year from homicides, from guns. We have over 32,000 that die from gun violence. Now, that number admittedly includes homicides, suicides, accidents. So, yes, unless you go totally, full-on authoritarian and ban all guns, you're not going to cut that number to, under 100 people. And I'm not in favor of banning guns, as I've stated 1,000 times. But what I am in favor of is regulation to drastically reduce that number. The over 32,000 gun deaths and the over 10,000 homicides. And there's no doubt that simple reforms would achieve that goal. I mean, we should be treating guns like we treat cars. We should have, a permitting system. We obviously should have a universal background check. AR-15s have been used in almost all these shootings. Why are those still legal? So, ban on high-capacity magazines. This is not a lot to ask for. If you're somebody who is a law-abiding citizen and you want a gun for protection, I'm nobody to tell you can't have that, and I think you should have that. But that doesn't mean that a guy who was a domestic abuser and it was on his record and we knew about it, doesn't mean that that guy should legally be able to get a gun. And if you disagree with that, then I think you're just being stubborn on purpose. You're searching for a reason to disagree, even though you know it's totally unreasonable to disagree on that front. So, it's just sad, man. They keep happening. And it really is soul-sucking and soul-crushing, where I feel, every time I see one of these, I feel so utterly and completely helpless. Because if we had an instance where children were massacred at Sandy Hook, okay, and then we had an instance where 58 people were killed, 58 in Las Vegas, and now we have an instance here where 26 people are killed at least. And all of those happening, very recently, haven't led to any change, any reform. Well, then you know what? That Onion article seems prescient and profound. You know, the one that they always tweet out after a mass shooting? You know, it's something along the lines of, there's nothing we can do to stop this, says the only nation where it regularly happens. There's a lot we can do to reduce the number of these things, reduce the casualty rate. But obviously money needs to not corrupt our politics because the Republicans are doing the bidding of the NRA. And you also need to have people who are willing to be intellectually honest about what the problem is. And many people are not. And then, of course, the final point I'll make here is the difference in reaction. Listen, when you had it's just a fact that when you look at the reaction after the Las Vegas shooting, 58 people dead, hundreds injured. That story, amazingly, was pretty much gone in the media after 3 days. So there's 3 days of coverage, then it kind of petered out, and that was that. And at first, people were like, hey, maybe we ban bump stocks, which is the least you could do because it turns semi-automatic weapons into fully automatic weapons. But then even the conversation about that petered out. The Democrats don't keep the pressure on because they're fucking idiots, and they don't know how to be strong, and they don't know how to fight for what they should believe in. And, you know, this is an instance where I'm keeping my eye on it. I think the same thing's going to happen. Give it 3 days and it'll peter out. And the response from the right, when you look at, for example, the terrorist attack that just happened in New York, where far fewer people died, and that's not to downplay it. Again, it's just to state the fact of the matter. I think it was 9 people who died in the terror attack in New York. When you turned on right-wing media outlets, it was wall-to-wall coverage of that, and it was, oh my God, we have to do something about it, we have to do something about it now. And of course, this is what they use to call for immigration bans and further extreme vetting, even though we have extreme vetting and all this stuff. But it's amazing how they go, depending on the identity of the shooter, they go on the offense in one instance to totally playing defense in the other instance. Where now it's like, you know, they say, whoa, what do you mean? No, this is a lone wolf. This is a guy with a mental illness, and this is not, there's nothing we could do about this. I mean, this is basically the price of freedom. And even fucking Morning Joe pointed this out on MSNBC. He said, imagine this shooter who went into a church and killed at least 26 people and shot a 5-year-old and a 70-some-odd-year-old. Imagine this person's name was Muhammad. Imagine their name was Muhammad, and then think about the reaction and how quickly people would want to do something. And by the way, in that instance, probably do something that would not directly address the problem. Because, like, for example, every time they talk about solutions to Islamic terrorism, they want to do stuff like what? The so-called Muslim ban, which doesn't even put countries like Saudi Arabia on the list. By the way, I'm not in favor of a ban. It's not a good idea. But if you're going to try to identify a threat, maybe the place where most of the attackers on 9/11 came from would be the number one place. Maybe the fucking, extremist Wahhabi state would be the number one place. But no, there are allies, so they get off the list. And then what are you going to do? Ban people from fucking Uzbekistan when this is the one attacker maybe ever from Uzbekistan in the U.S.? So, you know, their solutions are irrational even when they want to call for solutions in certain circumstances. But it's amazing how there's no discussion of potential solutions when it's a white dude with a gun. There's none whatsoever in right-wing circles. And listen, man, people say you can't politicize a tragedy. Everything's already political. And yes, that includes when there's a Muslim terrorist attack. That includes when there's a right-wing terror attack. That includes when there's a mass shooting. So it is only perfectly logical after all these things happen to, discuss what to do to try to prevent the next one from occurring. And we're not really doing that. And I don't think anything's going to get accomplished. And, in far right-wing circles online, you know who they're blaming this on? Antifa. Because there was a joke tweet that blew up where, people were talking. We covered this story where left-wingers were kind of mocking and trolling right-wingers and saying, on November 4th, Antifa super soldiers will behead all white parents in the public square or something to that effect. And it's just obvious jokes. And what happened? Many right-wing outlets said, well, they were a day late, but here it is. Here it is. On November 5th, they're killing all these white people. Unbelievable. Antifa, terror group. It's like, it doesn't matter what the facts are. It's always go back to the narrative. Here are the facts. I will go back to the narrative. Facts, narrative. Facts, narrative. Doesn't matter if there's no connection. Doesn't matter if it makes absolutely no sense. Hey, how can I find a way to spin this to blame it on Antifa? I saw some calling this guy, he converted to Islam. Zero evidence of that at all, even though the answer in this instance is literally right in front of our faces. The guy was a domestic abuser, obviously had serious issues, and he was still legally allowed to get a gun. Oh, it's really sad. And this is going to keep happening. It's going to keep happening unless there's a giant offensive from the Democrats to say, no, this isn't going to happen anymore, and here are exactly what our proposals are. I love how, Obama and Biden, they tweeted about this, and they said, we need to come up with strong, clear solutions on gun reform. Why don't you list them? This is the Democratic disease, is weakness and vagueness, Like, you literally can go out there after the shooting and say, universal background checks, no exceptions, a ban on high-capacity magazines, a permitting system, ban on assault weapons. You could list what you think the solutions are. But, it's just like, we must do something, and then that something gets watered down so much to the point where it's fucking nothing. Where even the bump stock ban, just the bump stock ban, which prevents semi-automatics from becoming fully automatics, even that died. And it died because the Democrats are weak and they don't fight, even though this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to give the American people what they want and what they desperately need and deserve. It's an opportunity to fight, to stand up for what your values are supposed to be. But that's exactly the problem. When you don't really believe in anything, then everything peters out and flounders away and oscillates in the fucking atmosphere and just becomes irrelevant. So here we are yet again. Another giant tragedy. And Congress will continue to sit around with their thumbs up their ass.